6:34 this morning. Okay, we have smart cars, smart lights, smartphones. Now we are entering the realm of smart pills.
Yeah, it's medication that's high tech to let your doctor know whether you've taken it or not. Joel Nichols joins us now with a story that can be tough to swallow.
It could be. And it's all a little Big Brother-ish in a way, you know. I mean, it's really technology, health tracking technology, evolving from wearable to now edible. A company has invented an ingestible sensor that allows physicians to track your prescription intake. It's activated by acid in your stomach, sends a heartbeat-like signal to a bandage that the patient wears.
That bandage is recording your rest and your activity and your heart rate, and it's also listening for the identifier of the pills you've taken.
A Bluetooth connection with the patient's smartphone collects the data from the bandage, encrypts it, and then you can decide if you want to share the information with your doctor. So you do have some choice in the matter. Select medical centers are already using the sensors with medications such as ones for hypertension, but the expansion of this is on the horizon, and the company that developed the sensor is conducting a trial for it with pediatric patients at a Dallas hospital. Involves young patients recovering from an organ transplant. Now, the sensor is safe and it's FDA approved.
4.5 magnitude earthquake centered in Pawnee, Oklahoma, felt here in Kansas City.
I want to share with you guys some interesting posts that I got on my Facebook page. Bellant felt it at 51st and Harvard. Sounded like someone was running upstairs. Susie, we live in a two-story house in Henrietta, and the earthquake was felt throughout our house. Coffeyville, Kansas heard and felt it. Collinsville did not feel it, this person says. But listen to this. In Glenpool, I was sleeping. It rattled me awake. I heard it and felt it shaking the whole house. Everything in here rattled. And just lastly, Randy in Muskogee felt it in Muskogee, not nearly as long as the September quake, but strong enough to shake the windows.
For 8 o'clock this morning, it was centered about 5 miles northwest of Warrenton. That's 9 miles west of Astoria, about 21 miles below the ocean floor. Our Lisa Balick there in Warrenton and joins us live. Lisa, what's the latest?
Well, no injuries, no damage, but there are a lot of people around here who tell me that they definitely did feel it. Now, some described it as if a truck had crashed into a building nearby. Others tell me that they felt the actual wave motion of the earthquake. Now, they felt that as far as Long Beach to Cascadia. Viewers contacting me say they felt it south to Oceanside along the coast. Now, I talked with some who felt it around here. They say it was definitely a shaker.
Well, it was just, like someone, it was just a shaking, and like when someone falls.
Today, just a few months after a massive region-wide drill called Cascadia Rising. Our Emily Sinovic found out just how much work we have to do. So are we, in fact, prepared, Emily?
No, that's the simple answer and an honest answer from the director, who tells me it's really impossible to ever be 100% prepared for a natural disaster that could kill more than 10,000 people.
There isn't a state, there's not a region in the country, I don't think, that would be prepared to handle what it is that we're looking at. Administrator Fugate from FEMA has said this is the worst disaster facing our country. It's Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, and Loma Prieta earthquake all combined times 10.
Director of Oregon's Office of Emergency Management, Andrew Phelps, tells me they learned a lot from the largest disaster drill ever conducted in the Pacific Northwest. It's called Cascadia Rising, a 4-day exercise in June that tested years of planning for emergency response after a massive earthquake and tsunami. A major takeaway? It's going to take weeks before emergency responders or supplies will get to many survivors.
We realized 3 days into this exercise, we don't have the food, the water, the sheltering capacity, the medical supplies needed to take care of displaced populations within 3 days.
How short are you?
We're short enough to know that we're going to need at least 2 weeks, I think, to get those critical supplies where they're needed.
Phelps says they're also trying to improve communications without cell phones or internet, relying on technology like satellite phones. The assumption is there will be about 20% of the first responders, hospital beds, and other resources compared to a normal day. And then there's the struggle to plan for recovery, repairing thousands of miles of roads and other infrastructure that could take years to rebuild.
There's nothing that we can do that's going to prevent fatalities from occurring in an event like this. People are going to lose their lives. Our job is, after the earthquake hits and after the tsunami hits, every life that can be saved is saved.
Governor of Alabama declaring a state of emergency and warning of a gas shortage after an explosion and fire in a major gas line. The Colonial Pipeline, running from Houston, Texas to the port of New York and New Jersey, supplying much of the East Coast. That line rupturing for the second time in 2 months now, and tonight much of it remains offline. Here's ABC's Philip Mena on the deadly explosion.
That massive pipeline fire sending thick smoke into the air.
Look how black that smoke is.
Aerial footage showing the haze blanketing a vast swath of land just south of Birmingham, Alabama.
Sound like they have some injuries. I think we may need to start additional rescue.
The fire erupting shortly before 3 p.m. Monday when the gas line was struck by a track hoe making repairs.
It looked like there was like a plane crash. I've never seen anything like this.
One worker killed and several others injured. As emergency responders raced to contain the blaze, the critical main gas line shut down part of a 5,500-mile pipeline, raising concerns of shortages and price increases at the pump. This explosion happened a few miles from where a pipeline leaked in September, causing a hike in gas prices in the southeast. The track hoe that struck the gas pipeline was actually working to fix a problem from that earlier leak. It may take days or longer to get the main gas line reopened.
Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull highlighted an announcement earlier this week with a message for people smugglers.
If they seek to bring people to Australia, those passengers will never settle in this country.
The Turnbull government plans to introduce legislation that would permanently ban asylum seekers trying to enter Australia illegally by boat.
A generous humanitarian program, a harmonious multicultural society depends on the Australian government being in control of its borders.
The government has said that this is about targeting people smugglers and stopping their business model. But the people that it's punishing is people who are here seeking asylum. These are people who came here seeking the safety and protection of Australia.
Australia already has one of the strictest border protection policies in the world, which the government says is aimed at stopping deaths at sea. Asylum seekers attempting to reach the country by boat are taken to offshore detention centres. Political analysts say the latest proposal appears less about further securing borders and more about the Prime Minister.
Malcolm Turnbull's own leadership, which is constantly under threat. Certainly his polling numbers are not doing very well, so he needs something to break that.
Earlier this year, the Papua New Guinea Supreme Court ruled the detention of asylum seekers in one of those centres on Manus Island was illegal. Despite growing international criticism, the Turnbull government has repeatedly said those asylum seekers would not be resettled in Australia. Critics say the new law would also permanently ban hundreds of people already in this country on certain visas from ever being able to live in Australia.
The remains of a Syrian refugee and her 2 children have been found in a freezer in their flat in Denmark. Police have said the 27-year-old woman and the 2 girls, aged 7 and 9, had been killed but gave no further details. A search has begun for the woman's husband, who is thought to be a suspect. The family arrived in Denmark last year and later received refugee status.
Now, with just 8 days to go until the election, Hillary Clinton and her top supporters are fighting back against the FBI director over what they're calling unfair treatment. ABC's Cecilia Vega is with the Clinton campaign in Westchester, New York. Good morning, Cecilia.
Robin, good morning to you. They sure are fighting back. I was on this plane here behind me when this political bombshell broke. This team was completely shocked by this news. This was the October surprise no one saw coming. Hillary Clinton on a swing through Florida this weekend, but noticeably absent her closest aide, Huma Abedin. Rallying supporters, Clinton tried to move past that political bombshell.
There's a lot of noise and distraction, but it really comes down to what kind of future we want.
Her campaign had been riding high about the state of the race. Instead, this morning, Team Clinton is rocked by her emails once again.
Some of you may have heard about a letter that the FBI director sent out yesterday. Well, if you're like me, you probably have a few questions about it. It is pretty strange. It's pretty strange to put something like that out with such little information right before an election.
From this new video,
but the more information that has come out, the more overblown this all seems.
To her top aides and surrogates going on the offensive.
Why would you release information that is so incomplete when you haven't even seen the material yourself 11 days before an election?
Now, Clinton's got a new ad out this morning. It is perhaps a remake of perhaps one of the most famous political ads of all time, that 1964 Daisy ad about nuclear weapons getting into the wrong hands. This time, of course, it is about Donald Trump. Clinton now trying to make her closing arguments. Robin, she is really looking to move past this email controversy once again.
Some new information on a major lawsuit filed by the NAACP. It was just filed at the beginning of this week, and it's getting a lot of attention. The group claims thousands of voters are being illegally removed from the polls in North Carolina, from voting rolls. The head of the state's chapter says a disproportionate number of those voters are black and calls North Carolina ground zero for voter suppression.
As for Donald Trump, his campaign is denouncing a show of support from the KKK's official newspaper, as in the Ku Klux Klan. The issue seen here borrows Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again." It says the way to greatness is to become a, quote, white Christian republic. Let's bring in CNN's Sarah Murray with more. She's in Washington. Good morning.
Good morning, Carol. The Trump campaign was very quick to offer a rebuke of this endorsement from the newspaper. I want to read to you the statement they put out saying this publication is repulsive and their views do not represent the tens of millions of Americans who are uniting behind our campaign. And this sort of matches what we saw from them yesterday when they immediately condemned robocalls from a white supremacist on behalf of Donald Trump, but not from the Trump campaign, that were designed to slander third-party candidate Evan McMullin. But the reason this has been an issue for Donald Trump is we have seen him over the course of the last year and a half struggle for a while to separate himself from David Duke. It took him a couple of attempts to condemn David Duke. And we also have seen him retweet white supremacists to his millions of Twitter followers. Now, a while back, the campaign realized this was a problem. People thought Donald Trump was racist. They thought the GOP nominee was racist. So they made a concerted effort for him to make appeals to black voters to go campaign in some inner cities and talk about how he wants to run to be president for everyone. Now, obviously, as we're looking at these early vote totals, we still are seeing a depressed African-American turnout, and we certainly haven't seen Donald Trump make very much in terms of inroads with this community. They may not be excited for Hillary Clinton, but we're not seeing them turn out in droves for Donald Trump either. But one thing is clear, the Trump campaign does appear to have sort of learned a lesson about distancing themselves quickly when they get this kind of support.
Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu says a Russian aircraft carrier group headed by an aircraft carrier and a battle cruiser has reached the Mediterranean. Shoigu criticized NATO for applying pressure on countries to deny port access to the Russian warships. But he added they have all the necessary supplies to continue sailing. The minister said Western countries need to decide who they are actually fighting, terrorists or Russia. He said an absence of coordinated action among different parties in Syria is hindering a political settlement.
Russia's huge arsenal and mighty firepower have allowed the Assad regime to stay in power and his forces to strengthen. Nowhere has this might been felt more than in the divided city of Aleppo. Now, after a 2-week humanitarian pause, Russia's threatening to resume a full-scale bombing of Aleppo.
All attempts made by the militants in the city of Aleppo to break out have failed. The terrorists suffered heavy losses in manpower, hardware and military equipment. They've no chance to break out of the city. To avoid needless casualties, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has announced a humanitarian pause in Aleppo on the 4th of November from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. local time. All humanitarian corridors in Aleppo previously prepared by Russia will operate for the exit of civilians and militants.
An offensive rebels launched to break the siege on their strongholds in the east is in its 6th day. They are vowing to press on with it.
We thought breaking the first lines of defense will take a long time, but with the grace of God, we broke their defenses in half the time we anticipated.
A number of Syrian rebel groups are involved in the offensive, including the Free Syrian Army, the Conquest Army, and a coalition calling itself the Aleppo Operation Room. Russia halted its airstrikes on Aleppo in mid-October to allow a humanitarian pause for civilians and rebels to leave the city in safety. But Syrian jets and helicopters have continued their raids on the city, dropping barrel bombs, cluster bombs, and bunker busters.
Well, Russia's Federation Council Chairman Valentina Matvienko has said Moscow will not cede any disputed Pacific islands to Japan. She's now in Japan to lay the groundwork for President Vladimir Putin's upcoming visit. Moscow and Tokyo have been disputing over the 4 Pacific islands known as the Southern Kuriles in Russia and the Northern Territories in Japan. While this territory row has kept the two countries from signing a peace treaty formally ending their World War II hostilities.
President Barack Obama says the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is examining whether the 4-state Dakota Access Oil Pipeline can be rerouted in North Dakota to alleviate the concerns of American Indians. The 1,200-mile, $3.8 billion pipeline will carry oil through North and South Dakota and will skirt the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation on the border. The tribe objects to the project, saying it could threaten drinking water and destroy sacred sites. The months-long protest has led to over 400 arrests since August.
According to CNN, Russian authorities have sealed off Amnesty International's office in Moscow as of Wednesday. Staffers arrived in the morning to find the locks and an alarm had been removed, and the electricity supply appeared to have been cut off. Amnesty rents their Moscow offices from the municipal government and hopes the lockout is due to a simple administrative error. The group contends that it fulfilled its obligation as tenants. This follows a call by Amnesty on Tuesday for an investigation over allegations of torture of Russian activists in detention centers.
Tonight, the specter of a November surprise from Kim Jong-un raises serious concerns from Seoul to Washington. U.S. military officials CNN spoke to say there are no signs tonight that North Korea is preparing for a medium-range ballistic missile test, as some reports suggest. But they stress those medium-range missiles, called Musadans, are fired from road mobile launchers, and a launch could happen at any time. And there is a separate warning that the upcoming U.S. election could motivate Kim's regime to do something dangerous to provoke the United States. That warning comes from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, and is published on its website, Beyond Parallel.
I think it could be a sixth nuclear test. It could be launching of their rocket to put a satellite in orbit, which demonstrates ballistic missile capability. Doing a major test would be a way of trying to intimidate the incoming president.
Just this year alone, Kim Jong-un has fired off at least 15 missile tests and 2 nuclear bomb tests, making 5 overall. Just last month, North Korea tested 2 Musadan missiles. They failed, leaving large burn marks on roads.
The burn marks here and here tell us that the missiles probably exploded upon launch or shortly thereafter.
But Kim's regime did successfully test a Musadan this past summer. Experts say it's a major threat.
The Musadan, as you can see, is launched off of this truck. It is a mobile missile. That means that it's very difficult to track it and to detect its presence before launch, unlike a silo-based missile.
It's a missile which could carry a nuclear warhead as far as Guam, where America has military bases. North Korea is also improving its longer-range intercontinental ballistic missiles. America's top intelligence official warns of its capabilities once it's flight tested.
Potentially could reach parts of the United States, certainly including Alaska and Hawaii.
A key question tonight, why would Kim want to provoke the U.S. around the time America elects its next president?
These are just not random. North Korea chooses particular windows that they know will gain maximum attention from the world and the United States in particular.